Hello, hello, hello. It is me, your Tru Heel Phenom SP3 back once again with an exclusive interview for Tru Heels BTR Between the Ropes with former Impact World Champion, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis. Nick, I'm so glad to be talking to you, someone that I've been wanting to talk to for a very long time. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for that introduction. Very kind.
No, man, you are one of the more decorated performers here today, and very excited to talk to you coming off the heels of your return to Impact Wrestling at Rebellion. A long time coming. You are somebody that has been one of the more prominent free agents as of this year. How did it feel to make your return to Impact Wrestling at such a huge event, being Rebellion right before the crowning of a new Impact World Champion?
Well, I thought it was a great way to return, re-debut, however you want to call it, because right, the energy, just hey, this is the most important thing happening in this promotion at this point in time, and I'm right in the thick of it. Can't ask for more than that. And it's a great honor to be shown that respect. To be brought back and put in that spot. Right out of the gate. So now the responsibility is on me to justify that and make it mean something. But couldn't ask for a better way to come back, and it felt great. The response from the crowd in Toronto was very, very positive, and you could feel the energy. I mean, at one point I stood up just to sort of get a better view of what was going on the floor, and immediately you could feel everybody. And I thought, oh, whoops, I kind of made a mistake here, because but it was interesting, because it spoke to me in a way that was like, yeah, these people are ready to see you do something. They're into this, and that's a good feeling. And like I said, now it's on me to justify it.
Yeah, you're coming into a very major role because you kind of inserted yourself in when Steve Maclin, the new Impact World Champion, kind of had a physical altercation with Scott D'Amore. How did it feel to, see Steve achieve, what was really a dream for him, defeating Kushida for the Impact World Championship, and then immediately kind of thrusting yourself into like a very prominent position going face to face with the new world champion?
Well, I think it's a good metaphor for what life is like as the world champion, is that you don't get a lot of time to smell the roses. It's sort of like, okay, you won it, and right away the question becomes, who's going to challenge for this? Who's in the mix? Who's in the hunt? So I took that opportunity to show him, I'm in the hunt. You need to be on your A game from jump here, because otherwise, you're in shark infested waters, and a great white just came into the mix.
And you kind of know all around about the kind of the road that Steve Maclin has taken, from his time in WWE all the way to Impact Wrestling, kind of working himself up the ranks, because you were kind of in TNA and you worked yourself up the ranks in a similar fashion before winning the TNA Heavyweight Championship, now known as the Impact World Championship. How do you kind of reflect on your journey, coming through the ranks in the company, taking time away and going to NWA and achieving so much there, now coming back? How do you kind of compare your whole journey where you came up for the ranks in Impact Wrestling and now you're coming back as one of the more decorated stars in the professional wrestling business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can certainly relate to where Steve's at, in the sense of, like, I know what it's like when the first time you win the world title.
Yeah.
It's you do feel this sense of responsibility, and you do become very acutely aware of how is business doing. How is the brand doing? What's the perception of the brand? What's the perception of the title? The only difference is that Maclin is a much more experienced first time champion than I was. just a kid, really, you know, and very much still, you know, I think, you know, you have to, it's hard to explain this to people, but when you get picked up at 21, right, when I'd really had, to be honest, I'd really had like 2 years experience wrestling when I got signed with TNA, because even though I started in 05, you know, I took almost a year off when I was doing Gladiators because I wasn't allowed to wrestle, you know. So you're really talking about a kid with 2 years experience of mostly the British holiday camp circuit, which is a very specific style of wrestling. So what what people witnessed in my first run in TNA was very much like someone learning on the job, which is not ideal, because you know, so much of that time was me just desperately trying to keep up, right? So what I never had a chance to do was to really find myself, you know, and figure out not what I wanted to be, but who I wanted to be, because you've always got a million different experts telling you who you are, right? With bookers and creative people, and you know, we had and TNA Impact at that point had a revolving door of, you know, leaders. It was like, for 1 year, Eric Bischoff's in charge, and then Bruce Pritchard's in charge, and then Vince Russo's in charge, and you know, and John Gaburik's in charge. So what I was in a way was someone who sort of succeeded in spite of the environment, you know, but nonetheless still got an incredible, you know, learning experience that you couldn't pay for, like getting to wrestle Samoa Joe and Doug Williams, AJ Styles, Bobby Roode, the Machine Guns, and then later on Sting, Kurt Angle, you know, like, you know, getting to be around those guys all the time. I got to be around Booker T and Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, going to India and sort of, you know, getting those opportunities. It was just a lot of sort of learning on the job, without really having a chance to breathe. And when I, you know, made it to the top and won the title, you know, when I look back at it now, I still you know, it's a sort of bittersweet, because I think I did work hard and earn that spot, but at the same time, like, I still didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing, you know. And so to then go away and to then really get a chance to go, okay, who do you want to be? How do you want to be presented? What's the wrestler that you can do? You know, what's the wrestling character that you can portray, you know, as well as anyone or better than anyone right now? And that's sort of how, you know, my persona as it is now came to be, you know, because I said, you know, I knew I was never going to be, well, first of all, I'm not American, so I'm never going to be the sort of all-American good guy. I'm not going to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm not going to be Hulk Hogan, or, you know, but I'm like, but I can study Nick Bockwinkel, you know, and Harley Race and Bret Hart, and, you know, Bret really is my, so much of my decisions are really based on Bret as a sort of barometer. You know, so to now have to be working with Bret and getting a chance to sort of be guided by him and get the validation of his, you know, approval, is, you know, a phenomenal feeling. So, you know, what's exciting now is to put it all together, to take the history that I have with this brand, and what they've been very gracious about is acknowledging what I've done since, and going, Nick Aldis is back at Impact Wrestling, not Magnus. Yeah, like Nick Aldis is here because they're big enough and mature enough and secure enough to go, Nick Aldis is a severe upgrade, you know, from the guy that was here before. And this guy's a, you know, main event caliber guy, and you know, they've shown me that respect to present me that way, and like I said, now it's up to me to prove them right.
Do you feel like a sense of vindication that it's kind of like that, where you're kind of immediately in a top position and they respect everything that you've achieved outside the company since your time away?
Yes, it's validation of the work I did. Yeah, absolutely. And it's validation of not just that, but also validation of my fans who, you know, followed me followed me out of my previous home, right? Like
Yeah.
the fans that say, I follow you, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. Like, if you're with Impact, I'm with Impact. If you're, if that's your new home, that's my new home. That's my new, it's very heartwarming to see so much sentiment to the effect of, well, Impact's now on my viewing schedule, you know. And hey, I hope that, I mean, look, so far so good. Had a highest viewing figures since last March. So, I'm certainly not implying that I'm the sole reason for it, but I'd like to think that I contributed a little bit. And that's really all I want to do, is just to contribute and help keep pulling this thing, up to the promised land.
And you mentioned kind of getting guidance from, one of your heroes, Bret the Hitman Hart. And, that's a name that has so much, reverence to it in the professional wrestling business. What has kind of been the number one thing that Bret has kind of instilled in you from talking to him about your career?
Uh, I mean, a lot of things. I'd say that the thing that jumps out to me, it was actually a conversation I had with Bret the last time I was in Calgary, was patience. Having the patience to tell the story that you want to tell, and letting the people know I'm in control here.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can chant, you can make funny noises, you can do whatever you want, but this is my ring. This is my story that I'm telling, and you're the audience. And I'm going to take you on a ride. Just having the patience. That's what Bret said, is you have the patience to make them wait, and I'll move when I'm ready to move. Right? Like, I think people can sense that, and because Bret will be the first one to tell you he didn't do anything flashy, right? Like, what he had was a credibility, and that's something that I, again, looking at the landscape, going, well, I can't compete with an AJ Styles on athleticism, right, and on physical talent, and so and things like that. So I can get, but I'm like, what I can do is I can try to present an aura of credibility, which is very important to me, and I think very important to the long-term growth and consistency of the industry and any brand that you're associated with.
And your association with Impact Wrestling, like you said, you can, in my opinion, you can take some credit with a couple of more eyes joining up and watching this past week's episode. And you were kind of viewed as one of the more sought after free agents. And I've heard you in other interviews saying that there was, some interest or potential talks with WWE or AEW before making it to Impact Wrestling. What made Impact Wrestling like the standout that you had to make your presence known following your stint in the previous company?
Well, I think the quality of the communication with Impact has been very, very good. And I will say that the way that Scott D'Amore, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much about all this, but I'll just say this, that the way that Scott D'Amore and I communicated prior to me coming in to Impact was the most easy and refreshing professional exchange I've ever had. There was there was no agendas, no double speak, no hidden meanings, no telling me what I wanted to hear or me telling them what they wanted to hear. It was they were very respectful of me, and they know how I see myself, and I know how they see their brand and where I can fit in. And it was like very much this agreement, like, I want to, let's time this to where it's best for both people, right? I can enhance your business and you can enhance my business. That's what it's supposed to be. That's what I've proven I can do. And that's, you know, that's what I want to do anywhere. I want to make sure that I'm making the most positive impact that I can. You know, and look, there's a lot of things that you can't control in wrestling. But I think that I've done enough to prove now that I can be a difference maker. And really, it's not necessarily about being in the main event or being the world champion or anything like that, but you want to feel like you're going to get the chance to be a difference maker. Yeah. And, you know, man, so far so good.
I think you are kind of a difference maker. You have that it factor to you, and you kind of went through all the great names that you have fought with, been in the ring with in TNA Impact Wrestling throughout the years, from Kurt Angle to Sting to Samoa Joe to AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy. And I can say that I'm one of your day one fans. I remember your introduction to the company wearing the gladiator outfit. I remember the British Invasion days. How do you kind of compare that roster that you went through coming up in the ranks in your previous stint with Impact Wrestling to the roster now in the locker room now? And who would be like at the top of your list? What's a couple of names that you would like to lock horns with next?
Well, I mean, to be honest, you know, it would be unfair to try to compare any roster to the TNA roster of 2008, 9, 10. I mean, it was a murderer's row. I don't think people ever really fully appreciate how good that roster was.
Yeah.
You know, it's like someone mentioned RVD the other day, and I went, yeah, I've wrestled RVD a bunch of times, you know, and it's like, I didn't even, it's like, not to take anything away from Rob, but it's almost like, oh yeah, I did get to wrestle RVD a lot on house shows and on TV. Like, I wrestled Rhino a lot, you know, I mean, stars, all guys that I grew up watching. So the roster now, it's a good mix of veterans and younger talent. You know, I'd say what stood out to me was the collective feeling of, let's push this company forward. Let's build this thing. Like, that's what stood out to me. You know, in TNA, you know, when I was there the first time around, there was a lot of money, right? Which can often lead to, you know, a lot of different agendas. And look, I certainly understand making decisions based on money, but you don't get the feeling that anyone at Impact now is just cashing a check. Like, everybody there is there trying to make a difference, you know. So it's like getting onto the highway, you know, and immediately having to get up to 80 miles an hour to be in the fast lane, right? That's it. It's like, it's that sort of, all right, here it is, like, you know, lace them up tight because it's time to go to work. That's how I feel, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you have a lot on your hands with this new Impact Wrestling roster. What is kind of, Impact has a bunch of big events coming up in the next couple of months, whether it be Slammiversary. They also have the big co-promotional event with New Japan Pro Wrestling, Multiverse United, and that partnership with New Japan is something that a lot of the roster kind of look at as a huge opportunity. And, there's a lot of names in New Japan that you haven't been able to get in the ring with. Who would be kind of, if you were on that Multiverse United card, who would be the person from New Japan that you would like to lock it up with?
I mean, like, if you're asking me who from New Japan I would want to get in the ring with, I mean, at the top of the list is Kazuchika Okada.
Oh man,
and it's interesting to me because, Okada and I are about the same age, and we were both. I remember having this conversation with him at All In. He was at All In, and I don't know if you remember, but I was on that show.
Yes.
Had a little
I was
deal going on there.
I got my own personal story, so I think that's the next question I'm going to ask you. But go ahead.
But I remember I was the NWA World's Champion. Okada was the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, and Jay Lethal was the Ring of Honor Champion. And the three of us were there, and I said, and I was talking to the Young Bucks, and I said, man, at one point, you realize that the five of us used to sit in the B, what we call the B trailer, at TNA at Universal Studios, sitting around all day playing Gator Golf, wondering if we were going to be booked for Explosion, to see what the Bucks had been able to do, and then to see that, what Jay had done, what, Okada had done, and then what I'd done with the NWA, in a year, to get it to a point where they were like, yeah, you need to be on this show, like defending the title, and obviously the match with Cody was taken on a life of its own. It's an interesting, a validating story, but certainly in the last few years, especially when I was going around the world, being the real world's champion, Okada was a name that came up over and over again. God, like people would say, I want to see Aldis and Okada. I'd love to see Aldis and Okada. I'd kind of like to see that too. And then the other name, again, because there's history there, is Sonata. Because Sonata was part of Impact when I was there. Sonata and I used to travel together. He was part of our crew. We used to ride around together. Like, we have all kinds of shared stories with Sonata and myself and Eddie Edwards and, Spud. And, so there's a lot there. And both those guys I just mentioned, Okada and Sonata, both, are just absolute, like, top of the line, best in the business sort of, conversation. So, hey, if, like I said, if you're asking me, that's who I'm gonna shoot for the moon.
Instantly, that just got me excited when you said Okada, because that was the first person that I would think of for you. And you bringing up All In, my final question for you is about that matchup with Cody at All In. I go back and I talk about it 5 years later. All In is one of the greatest events that I've ever been to live. I was live there in Chicago, and the match I remember the most is you versus Cody. And like I said before, I'm a day one fan of yours, and I felt like I was the only person who was cheering for you. I was cheering as loud as I can on the floor for you during that matchup. How do you kind of look back and remember that clash with Cody and kind of see how your career and his career has developed ever since then, and how important it's been to kind of both of you guys' legacy in your careers?
Well, I think it was very important to Cody's path to where he is now. And I don't want to speak for Cody, but I will say that when he returned at WrestleMania, he sent me a very nice text message, a very gracious sort of text acknowledging, the role that the match in Chicago played in his story. So, that felt good. Like I said, there's so much you can't control, but when I think of that show, what stands out to me is that Cody and I, you say that you were the only person in the building cheering for me. Yeah, I think that's accurate. But at the same time, when the entire building was on its feet, cheering and sort of giving us this standing ovation before the bell,
yeah,
I always took that as their sort of little tip of the hat to me, as that sort of, we know what we're here for. Like, we know what the story is here, but it couldn't just be some guy just coming to do the job. You know, if it had just served as a coronation, people would have shit on it, right? It had to feel like this could go either way. That's the key to booking. That's what a world title match should be. Well, I want this to happen, but I don't know what's going to happen, and it could go either way. I met people all weekend in Chicago who were saying like there's no way that you'll lose. Like Cody can't be the NWA champion, right? Like we did I thought we did a really good job of blurring the lines of, we just took what was real. And that's pretty much my approach. And that's the influence that I try to carry over to anywhere I'm working now. Let's take what's real and embellish it and build on it so that the audience can allow themselves to suspend their disbelief and get lost in it. Because that's what we're here to do, right? We're making movies. Like, we're trying to get people lost in what's going on. And the best way to do that is for them to feel like it's real. That's something that I got from Brett. That's something that Cody and I were absolutely on the same page about. And to think of this, Cody and I had that match. And yes, obviously we told a lot of that story at Ring of Honor. But most of that story was done with one guy and a camera, with Dave Lacana and a camera and a YouTube channel. It was very much, it was us, it was not a creative team. It was not a sort of, there was no agendas. There was no sort of, oh, this has to happen, that has to happen. It was old school booking. Like, what's the business here? What is it that the people want? All right, now how do we get them there? One of my favorite business quotes, and we can finish with this. One of my favorite business quotes is Kenneth Cole, the fashion designer. And someone asked him about how do you always, keep coming up with ways to, tell people what they want. And he said, my job is not to tell people what they want. My job is to give people what they want in a way that they weren't expecting. And that to me was such a perfect summary of what pro wrestling booking is, right?
Yeah.
Figure out what the people want by listening to them, and then figure out a way to give it to them in a way that takes them on a bit of a ride, and maybe in a way that they weren't completely expecting. And I think that's what we did. And I think that, I think we both learned a lot, and I think we've carried it over to, our careers in different ways.
No, thank you so much for this interview, and thank you so much for that matchup that, like I said, it has a unforgettable memory in my mind as a wrestling fan. And thank you for everything you've achieved up to this point and everything you're going to achieve in Impact Wrestling. Nick, please let the people know where they can follow you on social media or anything else you would like to let them know.
At Real Nick Aldis on Twitter. Not verified anymore, I guess, but I'm verified on Instagram at Nick Aldis. Those are my two. If you see a Facebook claiming to be me, it is not. It's not me. Or whoever it is, they do a very good job of just taking whatever I post on Instagram and posting it, but it ain't me. But yeah, Real Nick Aldis on Twitter, at Nick Aldis on Instagram, and at Impact Wrestling across the board. Watch Impact on Access Thursdays. And if you're in Chicago, come to Chicago this weekend, Spring Slugfest. It's going to be a great couple of days of wrestling.
Thank you so much, Nick. It is me, your Tru Heel Phenom SP3. This has been Tru Heels BTR Between the Ropes with Nick Aldis. I'm signing off until next time. Peace.